Welcome, everybody. I am Warren Munson, founder of Inspire. I know many of you that have joined us for today's webinar. This is our first webinar of 2022, and what a topical subject that we have for you, all around electric vehicles and how businesses can take advantage of a range of products and initiatives to ease the transition to electric. So on behalf of Inspire, I'm delighted, as I say, to be hosting the webinar, but it is in partnership with both NatWest and Octopus Energy. We have three experts joining us today. I'll give you a short introduction to each. The first is Mark Dodwell, Director of NatWest. Welcome, Mark. Mark is the Director in the Climate Propositions team at NatWest. Mark leads on propositions that look to address the decarbonisation of transport for NatWest customers, and also leads the partnership that NatWest has created with Octopus Energy, which neatly leads into what our second speaker and expert is today, which is Rob Lebansky, Head of Electrification. That sounds a grand title, Rob. Rob works across the Octopus Energy Group, working to design new market propositions with large-scale fleets and corporate partners, and helping businesses transition away from fossil fuels faster. He has been working on the forefront of smart and grid management and optimization for over 10 years now, so certainly is an expert in this field, and is now helping to develop new solutions for a carbon zero future with Octopus Energy. And our third and final speaker today is Chris, our very own Chris Downing, Tax Director at Inspire, who has more than 15 years of tax and accounting experience. Chris leads Inspire's tax team, advising clients on all aspects of business and personal tax planning. So what we're going to cover off today, well, importantly, after the action and pledges from COP26, we're all thinking that little bit more about our own individual impact and the impact of our businesses on the planet, and therefore where we can make positive contributions. So we've probably got 25 minutes to 30 minutes of presentations from our three experts, who over the course of that are going to cover switch into electric company vehicles, provision of charging points, sustainable and renewable technology, streamlined energy and carbon reporting, why businesses should now act and what you can do, and the tax benefits of electric vehicles and installing charging points. Once we've heard from our three experts, we're going to have a short Q&A session. So please do use the Q&A function that is set up within Zoom. Please start to post your questions. I will come back at that point and host the Q&A. But for now, I am going to hand control, with the technology will work, over to Mark, who will lead us through his presentation, and we'll go through each of the presentations just in turn. We'll roll through them, and I'll see you again in about 25 minutes. So thank you, guys. Look forward to hearing your presentations.
Thank you, Warren, and good morning, everybody. As Warren said, Mark Dodwell, Director of the NatWest Climate Propositions team. I do lead on all clean transport propositions. And as Rob says, on today's call, I've got Rob Lebansky from Octopus. We're actually sat in the same room. I'm here with Octopus for the day, working on kind of various things on how we improve the partnership. Really excited to have you all on the call. This was the bank's first partnership through our climate propositions team, and it's really focused on how we help our customers in that transition to an electric future. Charging ahead to net zero is something we've been working on since February 2020 with Rob and the team here. We launched in February 21, and I think it's fair to say over the last year we've probably learned quite a bit. We've learned a lot about what's needed in this space, and one of the reasons I'm here today is just looking at how do we improve that, how do we take that even further. The whole point of us partnering with Octopus was through the process we were keen to make sure we selected a partner that can provide us with a solution that's unique in the market and has the ability to add value when serving our customers for their individual needs, making it easy, simple and accessible. Before I actually get into the partnership and what have you, just a little bit of context, because I often get asked why, if you want to move on to the next slide, please, Rob. If I often get asked, what's NatWest doing playing in the climate space, and why are you interested in helping customers electrify their vehicles? Back in around the same time that we started working with Octopus, our CEO, Alison Rhodes, launched our purpose-led strategy, and climate is very much at the forefront of that strategy. And the reason we're very interested in transport is the biggest greenhouse gas emitter. You'll probably hear us say that a few times today. So very much, we probably bank about 30–35% of the businesses in the UK. So we feel we have a right and a duty to help our customers understand what's going on in the future mobility space, understand how they can improve what they're doing, how they can reduce their emissions through transport. And that's what really drove our partnership with Octopus. So it makes complete sense for us as a bank focused on supporting climate change to create propositions that support our customers in decarbonising their transport. So before Rob shares with you the detail around our partnership, it's important to understand the future mobility market, what's going on, how that might impact your business going forward, and maybe give you a compelling reason to think about EVs for the future. So we'll start with technology. What we've got on this slide is the disruption that's coming, the drivers of change in the future mobility space. Technology is clearly a huge part of the future of the vehicles that we drive around. The investment, the improvements in AI, improvements in battery development. OEMs are spending billions of pounds. OEMs, i.e. the car manufacturers, are spending billions of pounds, billions of dollars on improving the technology. And that's really kind of driving a fast pace. And I'll talk in a moment about some of the numbers that we're starting to see with people transitioning to electric. So that's having a big impact. OEMs, governments and industry are investing billions of pounds. It's not just the car manufacturers. So technology is having a real driver of change, as is consumer behaviour. Two faces on this slide that you'll be familiar with. You can like or loathe Greta, but she's raised an awareness in her generation. And in the same vein, David Attenborough has been sort of probably championing the same cause for a lot longer than Greta. But both are informing consumer behaviour, and that is starting to have an impact. It's starting to make a change, and consumer behaviour has also been impacted by COVID. We've had here we are 2 years down the line in the global pandemic. We've had numerous lockdowns, and the first lockdown was pivotal in how air pollution could be seen to be improved. We just weren't moving around. And therefore, the air quality in our towns and cities improved. And with cars off the road, that just got better and better. Clearly, we've seen that reverse. And what we've seen from an impact on COVID is where people used to maybe commute on public transport, they don't want to do that anymore because of the pandemic. And therefore, COVID is having an impact on how we move around. What we're looking to do is trying to think about the alternatives to public transport, active travel. Hopefully, public transport, active travel, they'll all come back, and there'll be, more permanent transport choices of the future. So those three areas really are driving change, but so are the government. If we move on to the next slide, please, we just kind of highlight what the government's up to. At the beginning of 2020, there was an element of focus on climate emergency when it came to company vehicles and transport, and the death of the internal combustion engine was set for 2040. In November of 2020, the government published the Green Industrial Revolution. That was a 10-point plan, of which transport featured out of 4 of the 10 points. They then followed that up in July 2021 with the Transport Decarbonisation Plan. In the Green Industrial Revolution plan, they announced that bringing forward at 10 years the death of the internal combustion engine to 2030, hybrids to 2035. And I think it's fair to say at that point, at the end of 2020, that took a lot of the OEMs by surprise and really caught a lot of people out. But the Transport Decarbonisation Plan in July 2021, that's where the government outlined their approach in terms of timing and technologies to decarbonise, like I said earlier, the highest emitting sector. It covers all forms of transport, including rail, marine and aviation. The government then followed that up with the net zero strategy in October 2021, and key commitments in that reinforced the ending of sale of new petrol and diesel cars and vans from 2030 and hybrids from 2035. but it also introduced a zero emission vehicle mandate, setting targets for the percentage of the OEM's new cars and vans have to be zero emissions each year from next year. So the government are doing lots in this space. And if we can move on to the next slide, please. What I wanted to do with this slide is just try and bring to life for you a little bit what's the reality. So it's great, there's all this stuff going on, there's all disruption coming, but what's really happening? The little table in the top left of this slide, this is the SMMT numbers for last year. And what's really interesting to see here, if you look at BEV, battery electric vehicles, that is up 76% year on year. Plug-in hybrids are up 70% year on year. And you look at diesels is down 46%, and petrol is down 15%. So we kind of see that as the change is coming, the change is happening, and it's starting. The curve of change is starting to take effect. So that's the reality of kind of what we're seeing. And in fact, there was an article I was reading at the weekend said 1 in 5 people are now considering battery electric vehicles, seriously considering them as their next vehicle choice. So with that, we're seeing the numbers move in the right direction. The top right-hand picture, charge points, so destination charge points. I think when I did some analysis this time last year, there was probably about 22,000 charge points available across the UK. When you compare that to sort of 8,500 petrol stations, that's a fair comparison. That number's now at just over 29,000 charge point devices in the UK as at February 2022. So we're seeing, people have started to make the change. The charging infrastructure is improving. Still got a long way to go, but it is improving. And then the OEMs are picking up the pace. A couple of years ago, if you wanted to buy an electric vehicle, probably you don't have a choice of a couple. There's now 80 different EVs on sale in the UK as of January of this year. So there's lots happening there. The other thing that we are seeing, the bottom left, that is causing businesses to start to think differently is the introduction of clean air zones, zero emission zones. If you're a business that transports your goods, your services, your people into one of these cities or towns that's introducing clean air zones, and Oxford will be the first zero emission zone later this year, then that's going to have an impact on your business. So we're starting to see that have an impact and an effect on and disrupting our customers and giving them that compelling reason to start to think about transition. And then finally, on this slide, the government have put fiscal policies in place to support the transition. There has been granting available for home charging units. That comes to an end next month. So that's no longer there. And the government did surprise a lot of people last year where they actually cut the subsidy on vehicles. I won't go into all the details of what the subsidies are today, but they are available and we can share them if necessary. But the government surprised everybody, being the only European economy to cut subsidies on electric vehicles last year. So they've supported on charge points. That comes to an end. They're still supporting on the actual car itself, and they are supporting with benefit in kind. And I'm sure Chris will come on to this later. But that support of benefit in kind is out there till 2025, and that has had a material impact on the uptake of electric vehicles. We're seeing the rebirth of company car schemes and people making that transition through company car schemes. So next slide, please. So my final slide, really, what does that mean for your business? So I guess linked to the point I was making around zero emission zones and clean air zones, where does transport feature in your business's value chain? These are some of the questions on this slide that you probably need to think about. In your value chain, your inbound logistics, your operations, your outbound logistics, marketing, sales, service, thinking about, as I said, where your people, your goods, or your services are transported across the country. And with that, what vehicles are you running? Internal combustion engine vehicles, they won't be able to get into Oxford city centre, come later this month. That could have an impact for you. And where are your goods or your people travelling in those vehicles? So there's a few questions there to pose a thought. If we just move on to the next slide, please, Rob. Final slide from me. Really, 8 years is not a long time. We're 8 years out from 2030. That feels like ages. It's not. And for those of you that have got vehicles probably on terms of 2-3 years, you're probably in the next 2 to 3 years going to have to think about, do you seriously update your vehicles with internal combustion engine again, and really think about that. And the question really is, do businesses make the transition now? Do they benefit from the support that's there, but could be dwindling? And who knows what the government will do with that benefit in kind? Was reading an article at the weekend. Some of the government ministers have started to wake up to the fact that the duty from petrol and diesel is not going to be there any longer. So how do we tax the electric vehicle market? So some businesses are being early adopters. They're making that transition now. Others will wait and see. But the UK is expecting 10 million EVs on the road by 2030. There's significant investment required to do that. So we felt that partnering with Octopus right now is the right time to do that, because we need to help our customers go through that transition phase. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Rob, and Rob will take you through the partnership, what it is, and some case studies of how we've supported customers so far. Rob.
Sorry, apologies, trying to unmute. Hi everyone, my name's Rob Lubinsky. I'm head of electrification here at Octopus Energy Group, and I just want to walk you through a little bit about Octopus for those people who don't know us, and the partnership that we've set up with NatWest to help people electrify their businesses and decarbonize their operations. So the Octopus Energy Group is now probably it's the fourth largest in terms of backed business ever built in the UK, and we're the largest invested energy company on the planet. We have about 30 million customers globally being migrated onto our Kraken technology platform. But that business presents itself to the world in a number of different ways. So firstly, many of you might know the cuddly pink octopus advertisements that you see on every digital board on the planet. There has been a few television adverts as well. We have about 3 million customers in the UK on Octopus Energy tariffs, but also white label M&S Energy, London Power. If you're on Unity or Co-op Energy, you're an Octopus customer as well. And we also have a business energy supply with about 35,000 businesses on it at the moment, with a target of 160,000 by the end of this year. And we operate the fastest growing European roaming platform, the Electric Juice Network, which is 157,000 EV charge points across Europe available to pay via our solution. In the next part of the business, we have our future energy businesses, Octopus Electric Vehicles, which lease electric vehicles and run salary sacrifice schemes for businesses, Octopus Renewables, which owns about £3.4 billion worth of renewable technology. And we also operate Octopus Hydrogen, that is supplying green hydrogen to aviation and construction companies at this point in time. And on top of that, our Centre for Net Zero is a research centre collaboration with cross-industry collaboration, where we're modelling what the future should look like in a world where fossil fuels don't exist. And Kraken Flex, which is an optimization platform that controls and optimizes businesses, assets, batteries on the ground in order to reduce the operational cost of organizations. And then finally, our technology services and consulting businesses sits under our Kraken Technologies brand. And that is, Kraken is a customer service platform that we operate on in the UK. And that's now been licensed, as I say, to a large number of energy companies globally, Tokyo Gas, Origin Energy, Tokyo Gas in Japan, Origin Energy in Australia, Hanwha in New Zealand. And then in the UK, some of the large energy companies that you may know operate their businesses on top of Kraken as well. So our own business, E.ON Next, npower, EDF have just signed a contract and will be starting to migrate customers as of the January 2023, and Good Energy. So about 50% of our revenue line comes from licensing our technology, and 50% of our revenue comes from our energy retail businesses, although you may have seen that due to the unprecedented prices in gas at the moment, we won't be making a profit yet this year on our energy retail business. We're likely to make a loss of about 100 million, but it's very important that our customers don't go bust themselves during this kind of 1 in 30-year event. Octopus Energy is one of the highest rated energy companies On Trustpilot, the only other organisations that beat us are our own white labels. So I think M&S Energy has a 4.9. So we're catching up our own internal team. And then there has never been an energy company awarded for which providers, recommended providers in a row. So that you get one a year. And we've just managed to achieve our 5th. So we're super excited that we're also the country's most awarded energy supplier. We're worth about 4.6 billion now, slightly larger than Centrica, the parent company of British Gas. We operate 9 companies across 4 continents, and we have retail businesses in the UK, Germany, Italy, Spain, France, New Zealand, Australia, Japan, and America. And we've done that all in 6 years, which has been really exciting and quite terrifying at the same time. But we partnered with NatWest last year to provide customers access to some really innovative solutions that would help them decarbonize. So the core of the offer was built around EV charge points because of the unprecedented amount of requests that NatWest were getting on their B2B team for help with decarbonising their fleets. And obviously NatWest have a solution called Lombard Vehicle Solutions, which is leasing electric vehicles and vehicles all across the country. So we built an EV charging technology proposition and paired that with our innovative green energy tariff proposition. So what we can do on our energy tariff is look at the way that your business operates, help you identify areas for consumption reduction during peak expensive periods in the day, and shift some of that into periods where there is greener energy. And EV charging is ideal for that. Charging overnight or in the middle of the day and avoiding the 9 in the morning peak and the 4 in the afternoon peak is very easy. And that will drop the cost of doing those things anywhere between kind of 9 and 26%, which is quite exciting. And then obviously NatWest have a wonderful suite of funding options that make that spread that cost of that infrastructure investment over a longer period of time. But EV charging isn't the only thing that that the customers were asking for. And interestingly, when we started talking about EVs, businesses turned around and said, "Well, actually, I'm really trying to figure out a way to either create my own trajectory to net zero by my 2030, 2050." Or my investors have said, if I don't have a plan and I don't decarbonize, I won't have a case for investment in the future, which is quite shocking. We had a meeting with PwC and they said a lot of their PLCs were saying the same thing. And Unilever announced last year that 50% of their portfolio now are brands with purpose, and those brands are growing twice as fast as the brands that are without purpose. So a lot of organizations very clearly focusing on becoming greener, more responsible, and putting our planet and their customers ahead of profits, and as a result are growing. So we've also paired the solution for EV chargers with solar and battery options. That helps reduce grid import requirements, and also solar generated on your own building is the cheapest possible kilowatt hour that you can consume. We give all organizations that switch to Octopus Energy a free smart meter, so you can see when you're consuming that energy and whether or not there's opportunities for operational improvements. And then if you run a fleet, we also have some very smart fleet management systems and access to the electric juice network. In partnership with NatWest, we are giving a year's free access to organizations that take those solutions. So it's been a really exciting proposition, and it's been developed over the last year to be something that's quite compelling. Now, I want to take you through a couple of case studies in order for you to see the kind of magnitude of the cost that we're looking at for smart EV charging solutions. And it's important to note that we put robust, industry-tested technology on the ground with features and functionality that make it future-proof. The worst possible solution for us is that we put a EV charge point on the wall, and for the CFO when he buys his Porsche Taycan, and then 2 years down the line, you have 5 EV drivers within that organization, and the charge point doesn't have the capability to provide that service to more than one driver. And then secondly, if you start to expand rapidly, we make sure that the infrastructure that goes in the ground today enables you to reach your transition targets over the next 5 years. Because the most expensive piece of the puzzle here is actually digging up the ground, putting in the cables and connections to the location where you need to put the chargers. The chargers themselves, the hardware is normally less than 50% of the cost of the project. So I've got a couple of case studies. On the left is a project, a business site. What you can see is this is the location, we put 4 EV charge point sockets in, 2 double 22 kilowatt charge points into that location. Per socket, it cost about £2,755 per socket to put that in. The cable run was relatively manageable, less than 30 meters, but there was quite a significant amount of concrete to dig up and relay, and so the cost of the socket was slightly higher. On the right hand side, we have a hotel chain, and that hotel chain asked us to look at 4 locations, and even within those 4 locations there was massive variance in the requirement for groundworks. So site number 1, we put 4 22 kilowatt rapids in for about £18,000, but they had a 17 meter cable run and a very small amount of concrete to dig up. Whereas the project number 4 on here, site number 4, is a £52,000 for 2 22 sockets and 1 24 kilowatt socket, and there was a 100 meter dig for the cable on that site. So you can see the magnitude, the difference between the cost of a project based on the civil works. However, when we look at that cost over the 10-year lifespan of the charge point, it works out at about £100 a socket a month. So quite a reasonable amount of money, and something that the hotel could quite easily recover within the room rent for those people who needed a charge point included in the proposition. And in fact, interestingly, they find themselves booked up regularly now with EV drivers who are stopping in the area because they're a hotel within about 5 or 6 miles of that location with EV charge points, whereas the others do not have them. So they have a high utilization on their charge points already. I'm also looking at 2 very difficult projects, and these projects had other major complexities associated with them. So you can see on the left-hand side, this was a building in Dartford. We put 4 sockets in, and the cost per socket was about £4,700. And that seems quite astronomical, but there were a couple of key issues with this project. One is that the bays at which the EV charge points had to be located were a very specified area, so we couldn't put the charge points in anywhere else in that car park because they wanted a designated EV charging bay that would grow from 4 sockets to 30 sockets over the space of 5 years. And the cable run, the incoming electrical infrastructure was on the back side of the building, so we had to dig up and route a cable all the way around the building. So it's quite a significant cost to the business. Again, hardware in this case only just under 40% of that cost, groundworks being 55% of that cost, so over 10 grand of digging up the ground in that environment. And on the right hand side, there was a 10 socket project in the middle of a car park, so rather than being mounted on a wall or close to the distribution board, that project was 10 sockets in an area, £3,129 per socket, and just because we had to remark all the bays, put in wheel stops, allocate an area for that project, and run cables a long way across the car park. So hopefully you can get a kind of flavour of the cost of the infrastructure based on the type of projects that you deliver. I think the key bits of learning for businesses out of this are the key things to keep the cost of installation down for charge points is where possible, locate them very close to the incoming power requirements for the site. That keeps your cable runs and your digs very short, and mount them to existing structures rather than posts. So interestingly, a post will drive up at the cost of a socket by about £250 to £300 per socket, because the post and the base that you need to put in the ground is worth about £500 to £600. And then I wanted to share also a really exciting case study that we've delivered with NatWest for a company called SureServe. Now, SureServe operate a fleet of about 1,300 vehicles in the UK, and they've committed to transitioning 600 of those vehicles over 3 years, 36 months with Octopus and NatWest. And what we've been able to do in this case is build a really smart total energy solution for that organization. So we built a home charger offer and a workplace charge point offer for that business. And on top of that, layered on smart energy supply in those locations. So we have about 13 sites on energy supply and another 10 to come, because they are the energy contracts are revolving over a 2 or 3 year period. We've installed charge points at 4 locations on their workplace where their drivers are spending some time during the day in the office. We've offered a home charge proposition with the OMI cable at the home location. And then we offer the electric juice network on the road. To pull that all together, we have built a fleet management dashboard, and that enables the fleet manager himself to track the progress of the installations. So at the moment, we've got about, of that 600, we're at a region of about 60 EV charge points installed, and in process we have 111. So we can see exactly where in the process those EV drivers are in getting their home installations completed, what the barriers are. We came across some fascinating barriers, like if you're not your installer requires a isolator switch to be put on the home, which is pretty standard now, and you have to request that from your incumbent energy supplier. So you have to ask your energy supplier to come out, fit an isolator, and only then will you deliver the install. So about 2/3 of the drivers that we deal with SureServe are with third-party energy companies, and they take about 3 months to come out and do that installation in those locations, which is shocking. So actually there's a significant timeline benefit of switching to Octopus. Not only do you get fantastic green energy at amazing prices, but you expedite the install of the home charger rapidly. And then this solution pulls all of that data in the homework and on the road location into a single dashboard, gives the fleet manager a single view of cost of running that vehicle for the entire month, and then we automatically pay the driver a reimbursement at the end of the month. So we've removed the need for an administration team to reconcile the cost of charging on the road, at home, and on the work locations manually, and it happens automatically month on month. Obviously, the benefits of using Octopus through this scheme are that we manage solar, battery, grid connections, smart metering, chargers, cost reconciliation, all via a single team of account managers. We have minimized administration, so you don't have to go out and get free quotes for every single opportunity. We're the UK's most trusted energy provider. They're obviously a team of experts, and all of the renewable tech here, we can deliver specialized delivery to your business. And it's probably also worth noting that NatWest have pre-approved funding for all of this equipment. So everything that we put in, it can be funded almost immediately by NatWest. The hardware is not the issue. It's just going through the credit checking process is the piece that needs to happen. So Octopus is reducing the complexity of electrifying businesses, optimizing your operations, including renewable technology, and obviously it's backed with amazing customer service.
Cool. Thank you, Rob. Hi everybody, Chris Downing from Inspire. Of course, the key bit around, and I think Mark alluded to it earlier, the key bit around cars in your business is, of course, what HMRC have to say about it. We all remember the days where having a company car was slightly more commonplace. If we talk to clients now, there tend to be very few who actually have a company car, or that's what I thought until I did a bit of research and found that sort of there are still 900,000 people in the UK that do have company cars. And I think, again, it was Mark that touched on the point that the government is starting to wake up to the fact that if electric vehicles have a favourable tax treatment, they're going to start to see a hole in their revenue. I did have a quick look, and I think they look at just the benefit in kind. So if we ignore things like the sort of vehicle excise duty / road tax side of things, then just the benefit in kind costs would lose them around £2.5 to £3 billion a year. So they're going to notice this, and we'll catch on at some point. But at the moment, things are good until sort of 24, 25. So I'll run you through sort of the pros and cons in a moment, but that's just a little bit of a scene set, really. If I can, I'll make this move over one page. Okay, so the broad rule for company cars, irrespective of the fuel type, will be the CO2 figure times the list price. So the important thing to remember is that's not the price that you pay. So if you go and buy a £1,000 20-year-old Volvo or something, you still revert back to what the original list price was when it was purchased. So the list price times the CO2 figure on the table gives you your taxable benefit in kind. And what I've got here is just a copy of what the current rates are and what they will be until 24, 25. And as you can see, the zero CO2 emissions, so a fully electric vehicle, you're paying sort of 1 or 2% on a benefit in kind, rather than as soon as you drop out of even a hybrid into having kind of a very low CO2 or a comparatively low CO2 at say 52 grams, then you're into sort of 14, 15%, which is kind of a huge difference. And I've done an illustration just to show you how that would look. So we have got the tax implications of if you do this. Say you want to provide somebody with like a 1.5 Golf, nothing fancy, something fairly modest, versus what it would be if you looked at a Tesla. So again, the Golf, fairly, or what would have been regarded as fairly clean, but still comes up as a 30% benefit in kind every year on usage. So for a 40% taxpayer, you're looking at £3,408 of tax that would need to be paid. So what's that, just under £300 a month for the privilege of having that car. Now you could spend twice as much for the benefit of that employee. Look at something like a Tesla. At the moment, 1% benefit in kind, so tax of £200 a year. So even though it's sort of double the value of item that you've given, the way that the government want you to think and be more environmentally friendly is that tax benefit is, well, pretty much negligible, but under £20 a month. So a huge difference for the driver of the car. And we'll come on in a moment to the company position. But the other thing to think about as well is if you, obviously the employer pays national insurance on top of this. So again, there's over £1,000 that you'd save every year just by switching from a fairly modest vehicle to an electric one. And if you're running a fleet of, well, say 10 upwards, then those savings start to mount up pretty quickly all round. I've just put a little bit of a note at the bottom just to say if you want a diesel model, then there's a 3% levy on that as well. So be very careful with those. And next year, the employer's rate will rise by 1.25%. So even more reason to have the low benefit in kind. So that's the individual's position, which I think everyone can see is fairly favourable. That then moves on to how that looks for the company. If I can just do the screen. Right, so if you were going to buy your Golf outright or HP it, so the tax treatment is the same on either of those. The corporation tax relief you would get on a £28,000 Golf would be £324 in year one. Now, if you spend £50,000 on your Tesla with zero CO2s, there is a special concession that you can have 100% deduction on the purchase of fully electric cars, meaning you save £9,488 in year one. Now, that of course is only going to be amplified, I suppose, when the corporation tax rate changes to 25% in, was it now, just over a year's time. So it's definitely worth thinking about what the impact is on the company, along with what are the individuals going to receive as well. Just a quick note, if you do HP, there's no difference on sort of how the finance charges look. Now, what I would say is, because you get the 100% deduction in year one, say in 3 years' time you sell your Tesla for 25,000, there would be a clawback of whatever your sales price is, but that's how it works for cars normally. So there's no real difference in that sale position, but it's just one to be aware of. But we are seeing, and I've had a real life version where I've had this discussion with clients. They were paying for cars themselves. They were taking taxed money out of the business by a dividend, but actually they stopped doing that. They switched to they've ordered some new Teslas. They're very happy with them, and they're saving the personal tax on the dividend as well. So they're fully on board with taking advantage of these kind of things. And another question we get asked often is, should I lease or should I buy outright? And in effect, there isn't too much different. So I tried to get some real life numbers. But again, even if you're leasing, the corporation tax saving is more than double on the more expensive but yet more environmentally friendly fully electric car. So company side, individual side, the electric benefits are huge. Just a quick note on vans, because I know a lot of people will have employees, and I think it came up in the case study where employees have got vans. At the moment, if you have I suppose petrol or diesel van, you're looking at sort of £3,500 benefit for the individual, if they are allowed to use their van for private use. If they're not allowed to use it for private use, then obviously they escape the benefit. But if you provide someone with an electric van, they are free to do as they please, or as much as you'd let them as their employer. So again, it's definitely worth having that think about. And as Mark said, with some places now restricting access to non-electric vehicles, again, it's just another tick in the box, really. The other key point, there's the talk about the installation of the charging points. So if you do have one of the charging points installed at the place of work, the company doing so can get the deduction for doing that. Also, employee can come to work, charge up at the office, should you want them to use your electricity, of course. And again, there'd be no tax consequence of them doing that. There are some slightly more different rules for the charging at home side of things, but there are so many of those that if you want to just, when we send the slides around, have a look at that link. It's quite a good link to give you different combinations. So if you wanted, for example, to reimburse your employee for any business miles that they've done, but they have to pay all the charging, they can make a claim for that. So it's just, then it becomes very specific as to how you set it up. But the key point, really, any installation of the charging points at the office or place of work, total deduction for, and allow them to charge at work. And again, they're tax free. So everything, for once, all parts of government policy across different departments appear to be joining up, and the tax rules are actually matching what they want us to do in practice. So yeah, I think that's probably a good point to hand back to Warren.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. And thank you, Mark and Rob as well. We do have a couple of questions. But first of all, I'd just like to say thank you, Mark, for succinctly setting the scene, putting everything in context. And obviously, we're clearly seeing throughout the presentations, but came across very clear in your presentation, the fact that government are, setting the policy and agenda here and driving us into kind of this more eco-friendly and world, and they're providing the benefits to do so, which we heard from Chris about. And Rob, thank you for actually following on from Mark. It was really good to have the practical insight and those examples and case studies that really brought it to life. And actually what I took away from that, and we're seeing it even in small transactions, is that funders and investors are very much on the sustainability agenda and, are actually veering towards those investments that, not just those businesses in that sector, which you can understand because of the growth market, but those businesses that put sustainability high up on their agenda too. And Chris, as ever, thank you for the insight from a tax perspective and that insight into why we're seeing that company cars are coming back, which is definitely what we're seeing across our client base. So let's turn to the questions. Probably both, Rob, aimed towards your part of the presentation. So I'll just put you on warning for the mute and the mic. The first off is from Mark. How do we, the government, get landlords on board for rented office space? We updated the lighting recently to make it more efficient, but the default position from the landlord was that we need to change it back at the end of the lease. So that, Rob, covered kind of lighting, but I could see it applying to charge points too. Are you seeing this? Is it an issue?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about lighting. I mean, talk about the rules that landlords put in place. The biggest problem we've got is a significant proportion of our housing stock across, and our office stock across the country is owned by funds. Those funds are backed by investors, and investors are risk adverse. And so the reason that there's a catch-all for it must be left as you found it is primarily to protect the investors of the funds that are managing those buildings. We are finding that landlords are starting to see the light, and there are some tax implications coming up, including legislation coming up where landlords will have to start thinking about how they provide good quality granular data in those buildings and prove that they're not handing buildings that are not fit for purpose or don't have a carbon reduction strategy associated with them, that they'll get fines and taxes most likely in the next 3 to 5 years coming out of that, including a lot of new development in the business space. There's no financial benefit to install gas boilers anymore. Pretty much every building that's going up, whether it's residential or office space, is now includes a heat pump. And a lot of them, every new building that needs to go up needs to include an EV charge point in order for the planning permission to be accepted. So there are a lot of things happening in the market, but I would say the reason that your landlord has that stance is probably because they're tied into a problem with the investors that own the property, and it's a standard document. I'm pretty sure that if you had a rational conversation with your landlord, that they would turn around and accept that there's a benefit of having a lower cost lighting solution in the building, and that would benefit the next tenant. So sometimes it's the letter of the law and the contract that prohibits us.
Yeah, it is crazy, isn't it, though? But Rob, you think about that is you're improving the building, you're making it more sustainable. And I suppose the challenge in some cases, that like Mark has got, is when it comes to the end of the lease, putting it back is just not going to be possible because that old technology doesn't exist. You can't buy it. It doesn't, But the world needs to change, I suppose, and it's one of those things that would appear to be lagging behind.
We see it across all technology as well. Like one of the biggest, we've got 35,000 on the way to 100,000 small to medium enterprises on energy supply with us, and 95% of those organisations don't own the buildings they operate in, and they want to be greener. They want to do green things, but you need land. We've got a project with NatWest at the moment for one of their partners, and we quoted for EV charge points, and they accepted the quote 11 months ago, but it's currently sat with the landlord to approve the install, and the landlord is trying to figure out what the future implications of having 5 charge points is on the site, and whether or not there'll be capacity in the future, etc. So there's a big concern around assets that either generate electricity as well. So solar panels are another thing. Small businesses can't put solar panels on their roofs a lot of the time without the consent of the landlord. The landlord normally has to take the PPA agreement rather than the tenant and pass that through within the contract. And then just ringing up your landlord and asking them a question costs you a significant lump of advisor and consultancy time. So the other part of this project we talked about, 11 months, we've had a consultant sitting between the landlord and the customer for that period, and all of the consultancy is on the bill of the tenant. Now it's bureaucracy, and we need to, 1, change the bureaucracy in the market, and 2, just all of these things are going to benefit not only the desirability of the low-cost operational building in the future, but also that EVs are going to be the future, and it's a benefit to anybody who will be moving. It's likely now that if you put a new tenant in the building, a proportion of the staff will already be driving EVs.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Thank you, Rob. Thank you for that insight. A further question, probably aimed towards you again, Rob. from guys. What would be the reason for not installing maximum power chargers? Surely a 7 kilowatt unit is pretty pointless in 2022. And I saw the range on your examples of, chargers going in. So what's the view there, Rob?
I mean, the reality is there's 3 core reasons why you wouldn't install maximum charge. One is, primarily it's around daily mileage of your staff. And if we look at the average commuter in the UK, the average person drives less than 21 miles a day. And you can recover 21 miles on a 7 kilowatt charger in an hour. 95% of us drive less than 49 miles a day. And so, the maximum charging for your daily needs at work is going to be about 2.5 hours of charging on a 7 kilowatt charge point. So, and a 22 kilowatt, a 50 kilowatt rapid charger, etc. They cost a lot of money. And so a lot of businesses are turning around saying, well, I drive to work. We all experience our vehicles as mobile objects. You get in them and you don't, electric cars are faster. But actually, my commute to work is less than an hour. And then I spend 11 hours in front of my desk because I work really hard. And then I drive home again and put my kids to bed, and then I sleep and I get up again. So the reality is that they're not mobile objects. They sit still for 22 to 23 hours of the day, doing nothing. So it's ideal to charge. And you plug in, you don't go to the petrol station and fill up in an EV. You just plug in every time you stop. So the way in which you use an EV is different. The second reason is if you're a business and you have customers, you size the charger to incentivize the dwell time that you want them to spend inside your organization. So if you're a hotel, a 7 kilowatt charger is ideal, is because people sleep overnight. They normally arrive with you somewhere between 6 and 9 in the evening, and they leave anywhere between 6 and 9 in the morning. And so a 7 kilowatt charger is ideal. You might have a few people coming to your hotel to use your coffee and conferencing facilities. So you might need faster chargers for those. But if you're a pub, you probably want a 50 kilowatt rapid charger because you could give someone an 80% charge in the time it takes them to sit down and have a meal, etc. So you normally size the charger to the required dwell time in that environment. And then the final limiting factor for size of charge points is normally your grid connection. So a lot of businesses have an energy supply to their building, and that is limited at a maximum number of kilowatts. And so if you want to increase that, you have to ask your distribution network operator, who is the organization that runs the grid in your local area. They will then say, yes, you can upgrade at no cost, or there is a chance that they will ask you to pay for a new grid connection, and they're pretty expensive. So a lot of the time you put the maximum speed of charger based on the size of your connection. And the second thing that we do as well is, because a lot of chargers are utilized poorly. So a 22 kilowatt charger will normally be sized, a dual socket will be sized for 22 kilowatts. So when you plug 2 vehicles in, it will ramp down to 11 kilowatts. And when one vehicle finishes charging to their required charge level, the other vehicle will then get the full power out of the charger. So it's another way of putting enough chargers into the environment for the needs of your business without having to increase the grid connection capacity, because grid, not only it delays the project, it costs a lot of money, and a lot of times because of the behavior of your staff or your customers, it isn't necessary.
Brilliant. Thank you for such a comprehensive answer. I talked at the start about having 3 experts, and Mark, Chris, and you, Rob, have proved that, and you certainly proved that in that response. And made very logical sense, and it's a good insight to the sort of things that people should be thinking about. So thank you, Rob. One final question, probably aimed towards you, Chris, from Sophie. Hello, thanks for all the info. I'm interested in getting an electric car, but still not sure, as a limited company director, whether to get the car through the business or personally, then claim back mileage and VAT through the business. I think I'd probably say with petrol, diesel, there is a rule of thumb, don't go anywhere near the company, Chris, but probably we've got a slightly different opinion, haven't we, if it's electric? Yeah,
I think I'm yet to see any circumstances where the electric is not the correct answer to have in the company. I know in some cases the mileage claim, particularly if you're doing a lot of miles, can be beneficial. But I think once you've actually taken money out of the business to pay yourself to buy the car personally or to buy the lease, then the electric car is always the winner. I'm happy to look at kind of Sophie's particular position, but the broad kind of gut feel is, yeah, electric car in the company.
Cool, perfect.
Warren, can I just come in on the landlord question?
Of course you can. That'd be great.
So just to share with you. So I mentioned at the start, I'm responsible for sort of clean transport propositions that we're building in the bank. We also have a team that are looking at clean buildings, and clearly as a bank, we bank a lot of those landlords. So there's lots of work kind of going on. I haven't got exact examples I can give you right here, right now. I probably haven't got the time for that, but it is I guess the point of me just sort of chipping in here is, as Rob said, we're hearing it all the time. We're hearing it from our customer base, and we have customers that are those landlords. And clearly, as landlords, they're also looking at how do they kind of decarbonise, how do they drive a sustainability agenda. So in that clean building space, we are working on that. So yeah, it is a case of getting to those landlords, working with government on policy in that space, but we are trying our bit as well. I just thought I'd come in and share that. So,
thank you, Mark. Yeah, and it's been great throughout the presentation to just hear that partnership between yourselves and Octopus, and actually the fact that NatWest are pushing the agenda here. It's clear to see, and actually clearly, I would imagine doing the lobbying to government as well, that represents and benefits their customers. So, thank you, all three of you, for, as I said all along, for being our experts, for that insight. I think it was a really broad presentation and has given, I hope you, the viewers of the webinar, an insight into some of the issues to think about, some of the benefits that can be gained. It goes without saying, and I'd like to thank NatWest and Octopus for taking the time, Mark and Rob, for supporting Inspire today and coming on as the experts on the webinar. But I'm sure that NatWest, Octopus and clearly Inspire would all love to speak to you if you've got any specific questions. Rachel, our marketing exec, is going to be sending out a follow-up to everybody. So we will ensure that the details for you, Mark and Rob, are shared. But from a NatWest perspective, I know the local relationship managers and directors would love to speak to you about any of your sustainability needs and anything you've heard today. So no further ado, really. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good day, everybody.